there. See the smoke? Smoke there.
Yeah, wait there, mate. I've got to give a day sack on.
250 meters, blue car, enemy soldier.
Time spent in preparation is always time well spent, often lives well saved, sometimes even the difference between success and failure. With so many individual tasks to be coordinated and synchronized, the action on the objective must be rehearsed in every detail and every man briefed individually.
Welcome to part 2 of our reactor contact video. Congratulations, you're alive. You survived the initial engagement, but what now? Well, in this video, we're going to go over how to find and locate the enemy, as well as communicate that information to the rest of your team so you can ultimately win that gunfight. So with that, let's get into it. So we're out here in the open today because, again, in this video, we're going to be going over the exact skills and techniques that you need to locate and find the enemy. The skills in this video are going to fall into those needed to successfully complete the 3Ds. Those are description, direction, and distance. Now, the other part of that is going to be our GRIT acronym also. That is group, range, identification, and type. Now, the 3Ds and GRIT are part of our fire control orders and a really important part to our reactor contact. But again, today's video is going to be focusing on how to find and locate the enemy. So with that, let's get into some tips and tricks that you need to foremost understand before we even get into the actual skills on how to do this. Now, finding the enemy can be very difficult. As a matter of fact, even though bullet sound signature can all play a factor, the time of day, air, and other environmental factors, including your own perception, can throw you off. Finding and locating the enemy is crucial to your survival. Doing it quickly and effectively for yourself and your teammates is just as important. So one golden rule when it comes to this is communication. You've got to be loud and clear. Make sure that you're using terms that everyone on your team understands. The more you fill that with any other rubbish or random talk or panicking, it's just going to throw everything off. So make sure the orders that you're giving and the communication throughout all of the techniques in this video are loud, clear, and concise. Gunfire is very, very loud, so use of radios is also important. But at the end of the day, hand signals in your own voice are the most primitive methods, but ones that we've got to always be able to fall back on effectively and reliably. Here's some cool rules, as well as being loud and clear, that you and your team need to understand. Firstly is state the target clearly so there's no confusion. Saying things like the tree won't do. So identifying things like tree lines, red car, blue house, use specific things. Don't just assume that the other person is seeing what you're seeing either. Positions of your team are very important along with this. So make sure that you understand where everyone in your team is and how they relate. Just because you can see something doesn't necessarily mean that the people next to you are going to be able to. Next is going to be positions of reference. I'm going to put a chart here from the Swedish Jaeger manual, and I think this is brilliant. Understanding what your references are when you're talking. For example, we have target straight, indicated by a straight line on the chart. We have immediate, left or right, meaning less than 30 degrees to the left or right. And then we have diagonal, meaning 45 degrees. And then we have next to or across, and this is your 90 degree from whatever point of reference that you're talking about. Understanding this basic chart can make it very easy to find targets. Lastly is going to be make sure that you're using triage. Just like with our medical situations, using triage in a firefight is hugely important. A man with a grenade approaching a machine gun behind their back is more important than a lone rifleman in a tree line. Just like a tank approaching may be more important than a machine gun. Understanding triage, the weapons that your unit has to deal with those and assets, be that air, artillery, or other, is very important. So make sure that you're identifying those targets in terms of the most dangerous first and the least dangerous last. Again, remember, if somebody gives a fire control order for a tank, but you see a rifleman, understand that that tank for your team may take priority. So have a system of SOPs for identifying triage of threats within your team. So let's go into how to find your enemy. Well, first of all, we have the gunshot. Gunshot sounds are a very good way of telling direction, but they can be deceiving. Again, the air temperature, air density, time of day can all make gunshots sound different. In fact, terrain can be a very important part of that too. If you're engaged in a valley, it can be very hard to determine the direction of fire. So a gunshot can be a very unreliable way of knowing where the fire is coming from. Another way to identify the enemy, or more accurate ways, might be the enemy's camouflage. They might be lacking in camouflage and their gunshots might be giving their position away. So having a keen eye and using a optic that has magnification is going to be hugely important. As well as with this, think like the enemy. If you are going to engage yourself, where would you be hiding? This is where situational awareness and scanning your terrain is really important. When you're patrolling, think, where would I be if I wanted to attack this patrol? Next up, and lastly, is going to be thermal and air assets. We have magnification on our optics. You might have a guy in your squad with a DMR that has a more powerful optic. You may have someone constantly scanning with thermal. Or you may even have air assets. Use of drones is very common these days. Use all of these things to your advantage to locate the enemy. After all, if you can locate him before you even get in the fight, you're more likely to correctly engage, search out, seek out, and destroy the enemy. So now with that, you guys know how to find the enemy or things to look for. Let's get into communication of where he is now that you see him, starting with distance. When it comes to distance, if you can accurately judge distance, you can be a serious asset to your team. So how do we do that, and what tools do we have at our disposal in order to accomplish that accurately? First is going to be your unit of measurement. Now, if you're in the United States, this is going to be 100 yards or 100 meters if you're in Europe. Now, 100 yards is a football field. Again, if you're in England, 100 meters is also a football field. So if it's easier to think of that distance like a sports field, definitely do that. You can use that to measure football fields away. 3 football fields is obviously 300 meters. Now that we have a unit of measurement sorted, make sure that everyone in the unit is on the same page when it comes to that. You can't have one guy using meters, the other guy using feet. This is going to cause confusion. Next up is going to be the appearance method. So the appearance method is what it says on the tin. What does it look like that it relates to you? Now this could be a certain distance of people away, it can be cars, it can be things that appear to us in our environment. We could use trees, the average tree is 50 feet. So using things in our environment to relate to that distance. Another way of using the appearance method is using our optics. The ACOG and the LCAN scopes actually have stadia lines that equate to the distance of a human shoulder at those distances. So on the ACOG, we have 400, 500, 600, 700 to 800 meters, and those lines get shorter. Well, the distance of those lines is the same as the human shoulder at those distances. The LCAN also you can also use this as it has a 30-inch line at distance in the bottom corner, and these can be used not only for a human but a car rim, which the average is 30 inches. Same with the ACOG, the average width of somebody's shoulders is the average width of a car rim at those distances. So using those, we can easily judge distance using the appearance method through either our optical sights or our human eye as a reference. Next is going to be bracketing. This is where we take the long guess and the short guess. For example, if I think that tree line is definitely not 500 meters away, but it's definitely not 200 meters away, I'm going to guess that it's 350. And looking at it, that looks like a pretty accurate guess. So that's the bracketing method. Next is going to be the halving method. This is when we guess half the distance to something that we know. For example, if you're on an urban street and there's a car, you've looked through your optic, you see that the rim is 200 and your building is double that, we can use the halving method to basically take half of something and then double it, using a frame of reference, timesing it by 2 to give us an estimate of that distance. Next up is going to be the group average. This is if your squad or fire team is deciding a distance of something and you're trying to find out what it is. You'll take the average of the group and basically just use that as your distance. Finally is going to be, if we've got the technology, use of laser rangefinders. If you have a laser rangefinder, congratulations, that's awesome, but these can be slow to deploy and if at night can give off a IR signature. Just like using a laser aiming module, our rangefinders do the same thing. They put out a laser beam, it reflects back into the unit. So if your enemy has night vision devices, they can see this clear as day. But if you have a laser rangefinder, definitely use that to find ranges. Finally is going to be mapping. If you've got a map, then we can look at our map and simply measure that distance. But this is going to be primarily used when we're setting up camp or we're stationary for a long period of time. Some considerations when finding distance with the human eye is simply going to be if it's very bright out or if there's open flat ground, things are going to seem closer away than they actually are. To the contrary, things will seem further away if the lighting's bad or the sun is directly in your eyes. So let's talk about the infantryman's best friend, and that is the range card. Now with the range card, what we're going to do is we use them whenever we have more than 30 minutes in a location. Now, there are many ways to do this. You can draw them on a simple piece of paper, but you guys can go online and it's DA form 5517-R, and this is the military standard range card. You can print these out and use as many as you'd like. Companies like Rite and Rain also have a version with waterproof paper. You can also laminate these and use non-permanent markers to fill them out again. But if you're anywhere more than 30 minutes, you're going to do a range card, and this is when your distance is also going to be used. So why don't you guys come around and let's fill out this range card for what we see here. Now our normal range card is going to be used to pick out objects. So essentially what we're doing, we've got all this other information that we can fill out. We're going to fill out our magnetic north, so we can grab that. The dot in the middle is where you are. You are then going to, the first thing, designate these rings. These can be anywhere from 10 meters to 100 meters, whatever designation you think. So if your furthest object is 500 meters away, your outer line will be 500, and then you just divide it by however many lines to make your life nice and easy. The point of this is we're going to range our different types of weapons. It's picking out prominent features in your area. So again, if you're waiting for more than 30 minutes, you're going to have a guy in your squad fill out one of these. So let's go ahead and fill out this together. If you need something to write on, a great little tool is a magazine, and then that just gives you something to your hard surface to write on. But if you have a book or something like that, use your common sense, a rock or something. So first thing is going to be your position. So we can just put base right there. Weapon, we're going to do M16. Squad up here we'll do 1, platoon 1, and company 1. You just fill that out. The magnetic north direction up here, we're simply just going to do, say we're facing magnetic north, we can do 360 degrees, and that is going to be our line right here. A lot of guys like to draw lines for reference up here, but this is going to be a 0 degree line. Next up is we're going to simply look outward onto what we have. First thing we have is a group of trees. I'd say that group of trees is around about 15 meters away. We're going to divide these lines by intents. So we got 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. So we said that that tree was 15. We're facing directly forward. I'd say it's around about 5 degrees off. So we've got 0 up here. We're going to draw 5 degrees to 15, and we're going to put tree. Now, if you want to draw a little picture of a tree, that's fine as well. You can use different colors, stuff like that. Our next prominent feature is we're going to look out. We have kind of like a berm in a T shape over there. I'd say that's around about 25, 30 away, and that's directly in front of us. So we're going to come to our 30, and we're then going to put berm. So we come to our 30 line, and we're just going to simply put berm. So for this one, we'll draw a little berm, like the shape. Okay. Next up, we have a tree line right at the end there. It's more than 100, but we can just put tree line up here. Okay, and we'll put 150 meters. So let's say, for example, there's a house out there at 50. We're going to come to 50. Let's say it's at 45. Let's say that it's at 45 degrees. We're going to come to our 50 meters, 45 degrees, and put house. So apart from my really scruffy handwriting, because it's kind of hard to do, we've got our basic terrain map right there. And then if we look out, you can see the references. We're judging these distances by all the skills that we previously talked about. And down here, you can put any weapons in your system, but now you can hand that off. If you're doing security in the position, you can simply hand your range card and say, okay, if the enemy pops up by that tree, it's 150 meters away. I already know there's a berm out there. A big important part of this, guys, is don't take any pictures. Don't mark it on a GPS. The GPS can be great, but the truth is when you actually sit here and you pay attention to your environment with a pen and paper, it forces you to look at detail. When Royal Marine snipers train, they get out here and they draw physical pictures of their environment because it really activates our brain. Again, think like the enemy. Where would you come from? What things stand out? What prominent features? I'm not labeling every blade of grass. If there's a meadow, if there's a divot in the terrain, then I might put that here. But you're not going super detail. It's the prominent features that can be used to identify an enemy attack or use to the enemy's advantage during an assault. Down here we also have a notes section if you got to hand this off, whatever notes that you might have down there. But there you go, there's your standard range card. Very, very simple explanation, but that's how we come out and fill them out. So we just spoke about distance, our range cards. Now let's go into our second part, which is how do we find the direction of something? The main way is going to be the clock ray method. Now a lot of people know about the clock down, my 12 o'clock, my 3 o'clock, my 6 and my 9 o'clock. But we're not going to use that when it comes to identifying enemy fire. The reason is everyone's orientation is different. Instead, the clock ray method that we're going to utilize is going to be, instead of looking down, is going to be simply flip 90 degrees on something. So if we imagine a clock on this wood line, our 12 o'clock is going to be here, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So if we have to identify something, we'll say red house in the middle, 3 o'clock, 10 meters. This is the method we're going to use. Again, it's not relating to the individual. If you're in a vehicle or a unit or a firing position, then it can be used, but the chart method is more accurate. Again, remember we have straight ahead, immediate, and offset. Using that language is very important, but when using the clock method, remember it's on the object you've identified, like a flat face of a clock. And then you're using those clock methods to identify a position. So let's pretend we have a car, we'll say car 100 meters, 9 o'clock, enemy soldier. And that would be a car 100 meters to the left of him will be an enemy soldier. Another way we can use is using our compass. If we're in a fixed position or we have a compass out in front of us, we can use degrees. So this is very good for accurate long distance targets that you may have more time. So what you'll do is if you're getting engaged by, say, enemy artillery, as a mortar team, you can say, okay, mortars 800 meters, compass 2 degrees to the right. And you will get your compass, set it to that degree, click 2 degrees, and then that will give you a very accurate bearing. This is very good for good and useful for when, again, you're not under immediate fire or you're in a fixed position like a machine gun, a mortar, artillery, or inside a vehicle. The final way, and very useful for a firefight, will be using our fingers. So simply what you'll do is you will look at a target and you'll say enemy, tree line, red house, 2 fingers to the left. And the soldier, and each person can do this, and this is the brilliance of it, is they can look at the house, put 2 fingers like this, and then they can get that distance. It's a very easy way to look at something and then say, okay, that's what, like 4 fingers distance to the right, so that everyone in the platoon can identify that target accurately, as opposed to saying car 150 meters, 3 o'clock 5 meters, or 3 o'clock 30 meters. You can simply say 100 meters, car 3 fingers to the right. Our final part is going to be our description. So when it comes to our description, again, remember, we want to be very accurate. If there's a tree line or if you're in a forest, it can be very difficult. And oftentimes the first question I'm asked when it comes to training is, what if you're in a forest? Well, use accurate things. I try to identify rocks or dead trees, or using the unit position over the other methods that we talked about. So this is where something like the 12 o'clock might be important. If the platoon is in one direction or patrolling in one direction, we would then use our clock ray method. But even if you are in a tree environment, there are different types of trees. We can say tree line. Be very specific and deliberate with your language. And again, use language that is no surprise to everyone in your team and that everyone understands. So now let's put it all together. We've discussed how to find the enemy. We've discussed what tools we can use to find his direction, distance, and communicate it to your team. So what will that look like in a firefight? Charlie Fire Team, 350 meters, red building, enemy soldier, 3 o'clock, rapid fire. So those were some examples of fire control orders and putting it together. You can see that they all had a similar theme and rhythm, path of logic to describing where the enemy is. But guys, just like anything, you've got to get out and train. You cannot practice these skills without getting out here. Me and my mate today, even today, looking through the ACOG, we were discussing distances, we were debating it. So everything is very interpretational when it comes to this stuff, and the better that you can get out there and train with your team, the better off you'll be. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the likes, shares, and support. It's a fantastic community we're growing. Stay safe, guys, and as always, look after your mates, look after each other, and I'll see you on the next one.